Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. Tomorrow's the election in the United States. And so I thought that we would ask Mr. Conrad Black for his point of view of what should happen. Mr. Black, what do you think about the U.S. election?
Now, when you say what should happen, you mean what I want to happen or what I think will happen?
Well, give me an answer for both.
Well, conveniently and coincidentally, they happen to be the same thing. I think the president will be reelected.
And why do you think he deserves to be reelected?
He has had the best first term of any president in history, except Abraham Lincoln, Franklin D. Roosevelt, and Richard Nixon. And unlike those three, he's achieved it despite having hung around his neck like an albatross, the preposterous Trump-Russian investigation, followed by the most spurious impeachment action in the history of the country. But specifically, the absolute scandal of 20 or more years of allowing practically unlimited numbers of mainly unskilled people from Latin America through the southern border, which he promised to stop, he has effectively stopped. Secondly, he did eliminate unemployment by a program that included the reduction of the taxes of 83% of individuals and all corporations. And as an opening in the dealing with the very serious problem of all advanced countries and indeed developing countries of the income disparity between the wealthiest and the disadvantaged, for the first time in recorded American history, the lower 20% of income earners were gaining income in percentage terms more quickly than the top 10%. And this is a consequence of a combination of Trump closing the border to unskilled workers pouring in and incentivizing commerce generally, but in particular the enterprise zone program, where very distinct tax advantages were given to the private sector to invest in high unemployment, mainly minority areas. In addition to that, he revived the whole concept of nuclear non-proliferation, which essentially had been surrendered in respect of Iran and North Korea. And he identified the Chinese challenge without being bombastic or bellicose about it, and was well along in organizing a civilized response in coordination with India, Japan, South Korea, Vietnam, and other important countries on the border of China. He did a great favor to the United States by sparing it the green terror, the full-scale assault on the oil business, even more thorough than what is going on in this country, creating millions of unemployed people and supposedly replacing them with sustainable energy and jobs in that field, which is a complete will-o'-the-wisp. It's a chimera. Obama tried that, and they got the bankruptcy of favored enterprises. And that kind of sustainable energy on solar panels and windmills is nonsense. I mean, you don't know when the wind will blow and when the sun will shine, and you can't store electricity, so you have to keep the old system anyway. And it's just nonsense. And Trump has stood up and said the environmental emperor has no clothes, and he's right. And in any case, we have no evidence the world is getting warmer. I mean, there appears to be some changes in the climate, but we have no idea whether they're part of the normal cycle, what the extent of them is, and what the results will be. We need more research, and he has put a hold on it. In respect of the COVID virus, I think his management of it has suffered from bad public relations at times, but has been very effective. He was bequeathed a completely broken down system of public health crisis management by the previous administration. All tests had to be by appointment in hospitals and sent to Atlanta, Georgia for evaluation, which was absurd. And there was a serious deficiency of ventilators and all other medical equipment required. He put that right in a matter of a few weeks using the emergency and War Measures Acts, War Powers Act, and they have reduced the fatalities by 2/3 and shortened the time necessary for a vaccine by over a year. In general, I think he's managed it well, and he's the only leader in the advanced world who's not just President Fear. I mean, he's pointed out that we can't live like moles, shut down the country, and be in a cold terror about an illness that only endangers 1% of the population. You protect the 1%, and the rest get on with their lives. And he's been quite sensible in that. So, and if you add that to his shaping up the Western alliance, the progress that's been made with peace in the Middle East, in general, I think he clearly deserves a heavy reelection, and he would be reelected on the same approximate scale that Roosevelt was in 1936 and Mr. Nixon in 1972, with over 60% of the vote in both cases in almost all of the states, 46 out of 48 for Roosevelt and 49 out of 50 for Nixon, if it were not for the fact that he was attacking the entire political establishment. Well, I think they deserve attack. I think the 20 years prior to Trump are the worst 20 years of presidential misgovernment in the country's history. And it was time to shake up the establishment and change a lot of the personnel. So look, he has his stylistic foibles that grate on my nerves, as they do on many other people's, but the people who lead countries out of difficult situations aren't sent over by a casting studio. You get who you get, and he's done a very good job.
The per capita mortality in the United States is 3 times what the per capita mortality from COVID-19 is in Canada. Do you think he should take any responsibility for that?
Perhaps, but he will also take responsibility for more than twice as swift an economic recovery and less than half the economic damage that Canada has sustained. I think the United States, by its nature, as a greater crossroads and point of travel in Canada, was bound to be higher. But with that said, I think his pursuit of a less heavy shutdown of the country than we've had in Canada has created some additional fatalities. But let's keep things in perspective here, Brian. Practically every death of any kind is a sad thing. And I'm not making light of that. But let us bear in mind that of those deemed to have died of the coronavirus, 80% of them had other serious problems, and it is not clear in 80% of those cases what the effective cause of death was. Let us also remember that we're talking about people who are mainly quite elderly and had a short life expectancy at that point anyway. Any hastening of a person's death is a terrible thing. I'm not diluting that fact in the slightest, but the average age of coronavirus as designated sufferers who died, fatalities in the US is 78, and the actuarial life expectancy in the United States is 78. And we simply cannot shut down the whole country in the US or Canada or anywhere else, any of these countries, to that extent, and with the resulting economic and psychological damage and ancillary damage, the substance abuse and psychiatric problems and so forth. We can't do that to the whole country in order marginally to reduce the 1%, and in Canada it's a little less than that, I agree, who are vulnerable to it. We've just got it wrong, and we've bought into the fear option too far. And Trump has made his mistakes, but in general, he's right. The only suitable approach to this, once we got a reasonably clear idea of the extent of the danger and the identity of the likely people to be afflicted by it, is essentially a positive one of determination with a maximum effort to protect the vulnerable. Not the psychology that the Democratic Party in the United States has tried to peddle for its own self-serving political reasons, and has been pursued in good faith in this country. I'm not likening Justin Trudeau and Doug Ford to Joe Biden and Zeke Emanuel, but the underlying psychology of their response is one of defeatism and fear, and it's inappropriate.
The polls have them down by 9 or 10 points. What do you think is going to happen that's going to change the result?
They're not down by 9 or 10 points. That's, again, a lot of bunk. Look, I read these polls carefully. And as you know, I have millions of readers in the United States, so I follow this carefully. Rasmussen, as of today, has him leading by 6 points. Trafalgar has him leading by 5 points. What you're talking about is the real Clear Politics average, which is composed mainly of left, Democratic front poll organizations like Politico, Vox, Quinnipiac, and Monmouth, and the cooperative polling efforts of the Washington Post, the New York Times, and the three main television networks, all five of which have devoted the last 4 years entirely to trying to prevent Trump from becoming president, having failed to complete his term, and now have him evicted at the end of his term. Not one scintilla of credence should be attached to any of it. It's rubbish. And furthermore, 56% of Americans say they're better off now than they were 4 years ago. 60% of Americans say their neighbors are going to vote for Trump. And the only polling organizations that have ever got it right with Trump say he's going to win again. But the idea that he's trailing by double digits is just absolute bunk from A to Z.
Conrad Black, thank you so much for your point of view. Really appreciate it.
Thanks very much, Brent.
Have a great day.
Same to you.
Thank you.
And your listeners.